Last year, a single farmer in Texas captured over 50 wild boars in one night. No rifle, no hunting dogs, no team of 10 guys in pickup trucks. Just a steel cage, a pile of fermented corn, and about 2 weeks of patience. Before that, the same farmer watched an entire soybean field get ripped apart in a single afternoon. The damage ran into tens of thousands of dollars, and there was nothing he could do about it. But this trapping method changed everything, and it's spreading across the country faster than the boars themselves. I'm Ambrose Wild, and this is how ordinary American farmers are taking back their land. The United States has a feral hog problem that most people outside farming communities have never even heard of. Right now, over 6 million wild boars are roaming across at least 39 states, and that number climbs every year. These animals breed fast. A single sow can produce 2 litters a year with up to 12 piglets each time. Run those numbers across 6 million animals, and you start to understand why wildlife agencies call them the most destructive invasive species in the country. The agricultural damage alone runs past $2 billion every single year. Cornfields, soybean plantations, rice paddies, cattle ranches, wild boars rip through all of it. They root up soil with their snouts, searching for grubs and tubers, and a herd of 30 can turn a planted field into bare mud in a couple of hours. But the crop damage is only part of the picture. Feral hogs tear up levees and irrigation ditches. They contaminate water sources with bacteria. They destroy the nests of ground-nesting birds and eat the eggs of endangered sea turtles along the Gulf Coast. And in some rural communities, they've started wandering onto residential properties, shredding lawns and threatening livestock and pets. For decades, the standard answer was hunting. Grab a rifle, head out at night with thermal optics, and shoot as many as you can find. Some states even brought in helicopters, professional marksmen leaning out of open doors, picking off boars from the air across thousands of acres of Texas ranch land. It looked dramatic, and it made for good television. But the numbers told a different story entirely. Researchers at Texas A&M estimated that you'd need to remove at least 70% of a feral hog population every single year just to keep it from growing. Hunting, even aggressive aerial hunting from helicopters, was barely reaching 20% in most regions. And here's the part that made it worse. Every time a rifle went off, the surviving boars scattered. They learned from it. They shifted their feeding to different hours, relocated miles away into new territory, and became significantly harder to track the next time anyone went looking. Shooting 5 boars out of a herd of 40 didn't solve the problem. It educated the remaining 35. They got smarter, more cautious, and more spread out across the landscape. So farmers kept losing crops season after season. Wildlife agencies kept spending budget on control programs that barely moved the needle, and the boar population kept climbing. Something had to give. The breakthrough came not from better weapons, but from better thinking. Instead of chasing boars through the woods at night, a growing number of farmers started asking a different question entirely. What if you let the boars come to you? The answer was a corral trap. Not a small box cage built to catch 1 or 2 animals. A massive steel enclosure, sometimes 30 feet across, constructed from heavy-gauge cattle panels and reinforced with T-posts driven deep into the ground. Big enough to hold an entire sounder, which is what biologists call a family group of feral hogs. But the trap on its own was only half the equation. The bait was the other half. Farmers started experimenting with fermented corn. They'd take dried kernels, soak them in water for several days until the mixture turned sour, and let it sit. That fermentation process released a pungent odour that wild boars could detect from over a mile away across open pasture and tree lines. Some farmers added overripe fruit or cheap molasses to the mix, but the soured corn on its own was enough to pull herds in from the surrounding woods night after night. The real engineering sat in the gate mechanism. These corral traps used heavy steel doors rigged to a trigger. Some ran on simple tripwires. Others used cellular trail cameras that streamed the live video feed straight to the farmer's phone, letting them watch the herd enter and hit a button to drop the gate from their kitchen table. One tap on a screen and a 200-pound steel door slammed shut behind 30 or 40 animals at once. But here's the detail that separates the farmers catching 50 boars from the ones catching nothing. Patience. Wild boars are deeply suspicious of anything new in their environment. Set up a steel trap in a field and trigger it the first night an animal wanders in, and you'll catch one boar, maybe two. The rest of the herd sees what happened, marks the location, and never comes back to that spot again. The farmers who cracked this started doing something that felt completely backwards. They built the trap, scattered the fermented bait inside, and left the doors wide open for a week, sometimes 2 full weeks. They let the boars walk in, eat everything, and walk right back out with 0 consequences. Night after night, the herd returned to that same corral. First, a few cautious scouts sniffing the perimeter, then the whole group moving in together. Sows with piglets trailing close behind, juvenile males pushing to the front of the pile. Eventually, even the big dominant boars, the ones that usually hang back in the tree line and watch before committing, started feeding inside the steel walls. The trap became part of their nightly routine, a reliable food source that smelled right and felt safe. And then, one night, when the entire herd was inside eating, the farmer closed the gate. That single act of patience turned a 1 boar catch into a 50 boar catch. It changed the math completely. If this is the kind of story you came here for, hit subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. What happens inside that corral after the gate drops is controlled chaos. The steel door hits the ground with a crash that echoes across the dark pasture, and 50 boars go from calm to frantic in a heartbeat. They slam into the panels. They try to dig under the walls. Dust and mud fly up in thick clouds, and the squealing carries for hundreds of yards. But these traps are built for exactly this kind of force. Heavy gauge steel, reinforced corners, gates that lock from the outside. A full-grown feral hog can weigh over 300 pounds and charge at 30 miles an hour, and the enclosure holds. Farmers learned that the hard way through multiple seasons of trial and error. Early versions with lighter panels got bent apart and broken open overnight. The corral traps that survive today are the ones built like cattle pens, overbuilt on purpose, with every joint welded and every post anchored deep. By sunrise, the farmer backs a livestock trailer up to the gate, opens a narrow loading chute, and moves the animals out in groups. The whole operation, from gate closure to loaded trailer, takes a few hours. 1 person, 1 truck, no crew needed. That's what makes this method different from everything that came before it. A single farmer runs the entire process, from mixing the bait to hauling the trailer, on their own schedule and on their own land. Now multiply that across a county, then a whole region. In parts of Texas and Oklahoma, organized trapping programs pulled thousands of feral hogs out of farming areas within a single season. Where a skilled hunter with thermal optics might take down 5 or 6 animals in a night and scatter the survivors in the process, one corral trap was removing 30 to 50 at once without a single gunshot. No noise to alert neighboring herds, no educated survivors running off to breed and repopulate somewhere new. The crop damage report started reflecting the difference. Farms that had been losing entire fields every planting season saw destruction drop significantly within 1 year of consistent trapping. Some counties cut their agricultural losses in half after 12 months of coordinated trap deployment across multiple properties. And the method kept getting sharper. Farmers mounted cellular trail cameras on the corrals and monitored activity through apps on their phones. Motion sensors pushed real-time alerts the moment boars entered the enclosure. Some welded their traps onto skid frames so they could drag them behind a tractor to new locations as herds shifted territory between seasons. The whole system stayed affordable and accessible, which meant any farmer with a welding torch, a sack of corn and a cattle trailer could build and run it without outside help. County extension agents started sharing trap blueprints at agricultural meetings, and the knowledge spread from neighbour to neighbour. But the captures also created a question nobody had planned for. What do you actually do with 50 wild boars sitting in a steel corral at dawn? Some programs relocated animals to managed hunting preserves. Others fed data into statewide tracking systems run by wildlife agencies. But the answer that got the most traction was the simplest one: process the meat. Wild boar, when butchered and prepared properly, runs leaner than domestic pork and carries a richer, gamier flavour that a lot of people prefer once they try it. Farmers figured out that a solid marinade with garlic, vinegar and local spices could knock out the musky smell that keeps most people away and bring out a taste closer to quality venison than anything off a grocery shelf. In communities where food costs run high and protein is hard to come by, hundreds of pounds of free-range meat from a single capture event changed the conversation fast. The animal that had been ripping apart their livelihoods was now feeding their families. What started as pest removal became a food source, and the trapping operation stopped being just about protecting crops. It became something the whole community could use. This is Ambrose Wild. The farmers cracked the boar problem by thinking like the animal instead of fighting it head-on. That same idea is playing out in other battles between humans and wildlife right now, across rivers, coastlines and mountain ranges most people have never heard of. Those stories are coming next.